Don't warm me out.
All right, there we go. We're live. So we're gonna give folks 5 minutes. Sorry to the peoples. We're starting about 4 minutes late. This is cool though. It gives people a chance to come in.
Man, I need a drink, man. That did wore me out. God.
You can drink on a live if you want to. Nobody can
Oh,
see you right now.
oh no, I was just joking. No, I was just joking. That technology wears me out. Trying, especially when I'm trying to hurry up. Something told me to go on at least 30 minutes early. I forgot to, Mac. It seems like you have to download everything and then Google and Safari, two different things, and you can't open one up. My Yahoo is opening Safari, so I got to put the password in Google. So, man,
Well, it's about to go down. All right. Let's see here. Hey, Kimberly Snowdy
yeah,
said, "Hey, everyone."
man, that's pretty cool. Why Isaiah standing up there with his hat on? Why you got him up
You know he stays freshly got funky fresh, dressed to
there?
impress, ready to party.
Why he got to be standing up there like, what is it? No country for old men. You know I owe you one, Isaiah.
I'll be right back. I'm about to go get scared real quick.
No, you ain't gotta go nowhere. You ain't gotta go nowhere.
Go get scared.
And this counts count down for you and everything.
Yeah, I should have had my guy make a banner just for this. And now Dr. EJ is our resident doctor next door. So I'll hound her to make one. And what I really should do is every week just have whatever the flyer is, just be the flyer. So I just grab what we already had since Isaiah stuck with me as his co-pilot.
Y'all are a good tag team though.
Yeah.
Isaiah, did you DJ in your like college years?
No, I didn't. I threw a few college parties in my
Yeah,
day,
I figured.
but no, didn't DJ.
All right.
You don't make it out of CMU without throwing a few college parties.
Hey,
All right. I hope y'all ready. 1 minute. 1 minute. Hey, this is our graphic illustrator, Brittany Curry,
She's
who
here.
illustrated our last one, guys.
She's the
That's
bomb.
Brittany.
hey, Brittany.
Shout
Thank you. Her illustrations were so dope.
They were so
yeah,
dope.
yeah. I'm breaking up a little bit. Well, here we go, y'all.
There we go. So
we go.
Sunday evening, so many amazing folks are probably jumping on board to talk to us today. My name is Isaiah Oliver, serve as president and CEO at the Community Foundation of Greater Flint, which means I lead an organization focused on engaging people and giving time and talent and treasure to make the community they love. And in this case, we're talking about Genesee County, a better place to live in, work in, and contribute to. I also have the pleasure of serving as the chair of the Task Force on Racial Inequities, focused right here in Flint, doing work to ensure that not only the disparities that we see in the numbers, but more specifically the inequities that perpetuate those disparities are closed. I'm blessed today because I have a couple of my good friends. I'm gonna mess up names. If ever, I see smiles happening already. No, we have Dr. J.M. No, see, I'm messing with you. No, we have Dr. Jennifer Edwards.
This is what happens when you're family.
Exactly. Dr. Jennifer Edwards Johnson, Michigan State University and family doctor, family physician. And then we have my co-pilot, Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden, 20-year trained epidemiologist, Michigan State University. And we have a guest with us today, Mr. Arthur Woodson. I'm just going to say Mr. Arthur Woodson because I'm not sure what title you want me to throw on there.
Man, whatever.
But we do have, again, we have three folks here with us today. But we're looking forward to taking the deep dive. We've talked a whole lot about testing and cadence testing. And lately, we've been having lots of conversations about vaccination. And we're learning a whole lot about not only our communities, but the way the systems are playing out for folks that are looking for access to vaccines. And so there are folks who want them. There are folks who maybe don't want them. But there's a whole lot that's happening between those who want them and those in them getting them. And so we're going to unpack some of that today. I know plenty of people have questions about what's happening with vaccines, what the rollout looks like. You may want the perspective of a family physician, and that's where Dr. Jennifer Edwards Johnson is here. You may want the perspective of a public health official or public health professional. And so that's why Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden is here. And so, like usual, I have all of the crazy questions, and I'll ask them. I'm going to ask the stupid question that comes from my heart and maybe from my family, and I'll get my silly questions answered. But I tell you, I'm not a professional in this space. I am a professional in the social services field. I work in philanthropy, but I am blessed to have two amazing docs that are willing to jump on for 55 more minutes and answer any question we have. So I encourage you all to share. The more people you share this with, the more people can jump into the chat or in the comment section and ask their questions. We'll read them directly and we'll get answers, again, both direct answers from the family physician or answers from the epidemiologist. In this case, before we jump into questions from coming live from the stream, our good friend Arthur Woodson had an experience. Arthur, from what I understand, decided that he didn't want the vaccine at first. There's a whole lot of reasons why the vaccine was on the short list of things that Arthur wanted to do in his life, and he's had a change of heart. And so he was having some conversation with Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden about that experience, and she decided that today might be a good day for Arthur to not only tell the folks that follow him, so I'm hoping that he's on his live stream, but the folks that follow many of us, why he had the change of heart. What happened in your life, Art? Tell us a little bit.
Well, I had been saying for the longest that I didn't want the vaccination shot. And, I said I didn't want it, but the people who do want it should have equal opportunity to have access to it. So I had been fighting for everybody to, have equal access. So last Saturday, the VA called. And they was like, Mr. Woodson, we're calling to see if you would like to have the vaccination shot. And first thing that went off, VA don't call you on a Saturday, So I was like, why are you calling me? Who put me on the list? How did you get my name? It's supposed to be 65 years old and older. So I ran through a whole bunch of questions with them, and they were answering the questions as I was asking. And what I thought about was being in the military, we had to go through a line where they had guns with needles inside these guns, and they shot us up with, vaccinations because we was going overseas, and we didn't never even question what it was that they were shooting inside of us. And I, started thinking, I was like, you know what? I it wouldn't hurt getting the vaccination shot. So I turned around and I said, you know what? Yeah, put me down, because if something happens, people in Flint will see, if something was wrong. If it's good, people will see that it's good. Let me be the brave one and jump out there. And I was willing to dedicate my life in the military. So, did a lot of things on the street, didn't worry about dying or whatever the case may be. I mean, we do a lot of different things that is different, but I wasn't worried. Once I said yeah, I wasn't worried. And the only thing that it did was made me sleepy. I was watching a city council meeting and I was live, and I woke up and people was like, Art fell asleep, he over there snoring, but that was the only side effect that I had from the shot. So, it's a lot of people are scared to take this shot. I was cautious. Me and Dr. Furr-Holden was talking, and some of the things that I was cautious about, she helped to explain to me, the different myths about this shot. And one of the main things was my scariest part was when I hear that they say it carries a message. What message and who's programming it? It was somebody programming it. Will it ever die or dissolve, or will it last in my body? What is it going in to do? Does it carry the vaccination? These are some of the questions that were asked. And then, people got to talking about, well, the Tuskegee experiment, they did it on all Black people. And I got to thinking, and I was like, well, you know what? It was all Black people back then, but it's a lot of white people right now running out there to get this shot. So I was like, well, you know what? They wouldn't be running out there if it was something harmful, if we looking at it in that perspective. So, I went on and got the shot.
Oh, well, Arthur, one, I want to just thank you for sharing your story. I'm hoping that it inspires somebody else who was on the fence or trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And the way you weighed some of the activities that you've had in your past or in your life with making this decision was an appropriate way for you to do that for you and your situation, for you and your family. And so thank you again for sharing that. Dr. EJ, could you just take a minute before we're going to start? Questions can start now. Please put them in the chat. Dr. EJ, could you just spend a minute talking about mRNA? Arthur brought up mRNA, so I think it would be good to kind of break down mRNA.
Sure. Arthur, thank you for your story and thank you for your service. When we talk about the mRNA vaccine, mRNA is something that makes proteins in the body. And so for the mRNA vaccine that are Moderna and Pfizer, the mRNA kind of carries the instructions for a specific part of the COVID virus. And so those mRNA instructions get kind of translated into protein once they're in the cell. And mRNA are just instructions. Eventually the mRNA gets degraded in your body. It's not something to worry about. It never kind of interacts with our DNA. It's not something that we should be concerned about. They are instructions regarding the protein that is most commonly associated with the COVID virus. By doing that, it gives us some idea of what sort of response to make to this spike protein that's on the COVID virus, right? So you have a vaccine. The vaccine is an mRNA vaccine. The vaccine is put into your arm. It's an mRNA vaccine. It goes into your arm. And a little bit of that mRNA carries the instructions for the spike protein that we've all kind of talked about as being one of the biggest kind of issues that we talk about with the COVID vaccine. It's kind of, when we talk about the spike protein and we talk about corona means crown. So that spike protein is kind of the big feature of the coronavirus. It's the thing that sets the coronavirus apart from lots of other things. And the mRNA is the instructions for that spike protein. By giving us the instructions, it tells us what types of antibodies and what types of immune response we need to make to this virus. So really what the vaccine does is it tells our body how to make the appropriate immune response should you encounter the COVID virus. And your body goes through the process of making all these excellent antibodies and T cells and B cells, and those are technical terms that you might hear. But really, it's the immune response that you make should your body encounter COVID. And it takes a little while for your body to make that response. And so initially, you get one shot of the mRNA vaccine, and that protects you for a little bit while your body's doing the work of making those antibodies and making that response to what would be a COVID infection should you see it. And so I think that's kind of a summation of what the mRNA is doing in your body. Eventually that mRNA gets degraded and we don't see it again.
Can I add a little something to that real quick?
Yeah, I got 2 questions too though. So jump in quick and jump out fast.
So because when she says it's the instructions or the recipe, it's in the coronavirus model, and she said it's a crown, right? So think about it. A crown is round with the little spikes on top. We call those the spike proteins, right? The vaccine doesn't even contain those spike proteins. It only contains the recipe for how to make those spike proteins. Your body actually makes the spike proteins. What those spike proteins do basically is unlock your cell. So the spike proteins are like the key. They unlock your cell, and then they let the whole viral molecule in, the whole crown. So the tip of the crown is the key, and it lets the whole molecule in. Your body's getting trained to block that key from working, from even getting in your cell. So people have a lot of fear about, well, I don't want what's in the vaccine. But realize you're getting the instructions on how to make the key, the spikes on the tip of the crown. If you get COVID, you're getting the whole viral molecule. That molecule is going to come in. Those spike proteins are going to lock your cell, let the whole virus in, and then your body's going to do all the work of replicating the virus. So that little teeny piece of the vaccine, that little teeny piece of the virus that's in the vaccine is 8,000 times better than it would be to actually get the virus itself.
And I think that's the important piece, right, is the COVID virus is an mRNA virus, right? Whereas the vaccine, like Dr. Furr-Holden just described, those are instructions. So that's how they're different. But similarly, they both are mRNA.
So if you can pull up Lisa Rawlings' question, I'm going to get Connie Edwards to know that I'm going to come to your question in just a second. But this one clearly aligns to the mRNA description that you just gave. What do you think about the new vaccines from Johnson & Johnson? I know you talked about this a little bit, Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden, a few weeks back. And what about the vaccines being developed by foreign countries? And I know you had some conversations about the process that we go through in America that's a little different than foreign countries developing them. I would say if you start, Dr. Johnson, and then Dr. Furr-Holden, if you jump in on the tail end, that would be great.
Sure. I think we need as many vaccines as we can get. I think the idea is to have opportunities for people to be vaccinated. Specifically, there's some good data on Johnson & Johnson in terms of efficacy against preventing severe COVID disease. And I think that's one of the important metrics that we have to look at. I think it's important to be thoughtful about the fact that some of these vaccines have different metrics, but one of the most important metrics that we should be looking at is the ability to prevent severe disease. And so I'm excited about the idea that we have more opportunities for vaccination. And it's good to see kind of more vaccines on the market that can prevent severe disease.
So, and I remember the last time I talked to you about this, I was asking a similar question about the different vaccines. And you were like, hey, listen, whatever one you can get it. Could you say that again in the way that maybe you yell at me like a little brother, but I'll take it.
I said, even whatever vaccine you can get it. But also, like, don't give up your opportunity to get in line is kind of the most important piece, right? Is, get in line where you can, when you can. and be thoughtful about your ability to access resources like this in the process, right? Like that doesn't mean you have to continue thinking, or that doesn't mean that you have to stop thinking about, you know, what your risk might be, the things you're concerned about. That doesn't mean you stop getting answers to your questions, but it does mean get in line, because the process might be, no one knows how long sometimes, right? So just because you got in line today doesn't mean you're getting vaccinated tomorrow.
Perfect. And then Dr.
Hey,
Furr-Holden,
idea.
could you talk a little bit about foreign vaccines?
Yeah, so we have the most rigorous process for approving vaccines. I can just tell you that the process that vaccines go through in our country for the FDA, this is why we've seen this with other drugs and other medications, where there'll be a medication that's approved for use in another country, but it won't hit the bar for approval for use in our country. So you will most likely not see foreign vaccines being used here. Why? Because we are a front runner in the pharmaceutical industry. We're a front runner in vaccine development, and the processes that they use to both test and approve their vaccines oftentimes are different or not quite as rigorous. And I'm not saying that people don't do their own rigorous level of work, but we have our own standards. And if it doesn't meet that standards, we won't see them here. What I would expect to see, though, is in countries where variants start to show up, they might be front runners in those variants, but that's simply because it originated in their country. So most places are doing surveillance, right? They're looking at the virus, they're looking at how it mutates. And I want to be really clear, all viruses mutate. DNA-based viruses mutate less because they've got like this sort of error-proof code built into them. RNA viruses are a little more susceptible to mutation, so that's to be expected. But the foreign vaccines will most likely not be used here, and it's because they go through a different vetting process than ours do. And their variants, we are more likely to see people develop vaccines in their country for the variants in their country.
So one quick thing, people can hold on 1 second. I want people to make sure that they continue to share this with your friends. We're getting lots of questions here, and so really quickly, Arthur, and then I need to jump back in because I got like 4 or 5 questions in.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting ready to ask is a question to Dr. Furr-Holden. Being that we have different variants and not knowing, especially when they mutating, it's mutating all the time. By me taking this Pfizer shot, and I took 2 shots, and then you have the South African variant, and then you have the UK variant, and we hearing that some company might have to come out with a booster shot. By me taking the 2 shots, would I have to take another shot after the 2 shots that I took with the Pfizer?
So this is a question that probably Dr. EJ and I could both answer. And I have a quick question. Am I breaking up for you guys? Am I breaking up?
You slowed down a little bit.
A little bit. A little bit. You have.
I really want to switch network.
Yeah, but I need you to jump in on this question. That way we can get back into these ones that are in the chat. I want to make sure we get through, folks.
So you want me to go?
The short version is that. Yeah, you go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. EJ.
So I think the question about variants is really good. The most recent data we've seen on variants is that we feel really good about Pfizer and Moderna's ability to protect against the variants. But there was another question that asked, why do we need to continue to wear masks? And most importantly, the virus is unlikely to mutate if it doesn't have new people to infect, right? And so our ability to wear masks and prevent new people from getting infected with COVID and prevent the spread of infection, despite maybe being vaccinated ourselves, really decreases that likelihood of new variants popping up. Right now, we are really optimistic about the ability for the vaccines we have, and the data that we have looks pretty good about the ability to protect against the new variants. But there is the possibility that as the virus mutates, there will be variants that are able to sort of hide from the vaccine that has been provided, right? Either Moderna or Pfizer. So that requires us to be really diligent about wearing masks and distancing where we can. What is important and what is really great is we're seeing some data that's suggesting that our vaccinations are working, and they're working in not only preventing disease, but preventing spread as well, right? So we're seeing that in people who are vaccinated, we're seeing even less asymptomatic infections. We're seeing that people who are vaccinated are even less likely to spread COVID, as well as less likely to get the disease.
Yeah, and could you talk a little bit about the multiple layers and proof success? I don't know who would talk about that best.
That's Dr. Furr-Holden.
Okay, Dr. Furr-Holden.
Yeah, so the vaccine, again, to put it in context, is one, I say, important, albeit imperfect layer of protection. And there's a question in the queue that says, well, what's the point in getting the vaccine if I still have to wear a mask? And so the reason I say it's imperfect is because the primary way that it works, the two that are out, is it definitely will stop you from severe illness, and it will also greatly decrease the likelihood that you will be able to spread. So the reason I say it's imperfect is because the primary way that it works. Whoa. Somebody is, I think that's Art. Somebody had the Facebook live feed going too. Sorry about that. So anyway, so the vaccine is an important and imperfect layer of protection. Those other layers of protection, the wearing the mask, the hand washing, the federal and financial support from government, the environmental protections, things like thinning out classrooms and redesigning workspaces and upgrading ventilation systems, all of those things are a part of this kind of Swiss cheese model. No one of them is going to get the job done. But if we do them all simultaneously, we can get the pandemic under control. So the vaccine is not the answer to all the problems, but it is an important piece of the equation and an important layer of the process.
So Lisa Rawlings has a follow-up, and I know I have a few questions in between this one and hers, but it is a follow-up to this one. It says, so the vaccines just protect us. We could still have the virus, not get sick, but get someone else sick. So we should mask up. And I want you to kind of take that one, Dr. EJ, if you will.
Lisa, I really appreciate that comment. So that is kind of the sentiment, right? Is that the vaccine protects us. We could still carry the vaccine maybe in our nose, on our hand, we could still carry the virus maybe in our nose or on our hands. And so we have to be careful because we could be carriers of the virus to someone else. What I was talking about relative to new data is we're showing more data that the vaccines likely protect a lot against our ability to spread it. So we're seeing data that both Moderna and Pfizer really decrease our ability to spread the virus. But right now we don't have complete data, and it's still important for us to be careful and use all of those methods of protection that Dr. Furr-Holden alluded to.
All right. And so you keep the mic then, Dr. EJ. Connie Edwards, and I didn't forget about you. We are coming back. So three people have told me the second shot they got sick, throwing up, fever, and just not feeling well. And I've heard this over and over again. I think even Dr. Deborah talked to me a little bit about preparing for this when she was getting ready to get her shot. Talk about why that happens.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll talk a little bit about my own experience. I received the Pfizer vaccine. I did not have significant symptoms either after dose 1 or dose 2, but I will tell you my colleagues had symptoms. They were fatigued, they were tired, they had headaches, a small fever. And so one of the things I've noticed is that, people are having these symptoms, and it tends to happen more after the second dose of the vaccine. Part of why this happens is that your immune system is building its response. So once your body starts creating all of these immune cells and sees the mRNA instructions and notices that it's supposed to be kicking up an immune response, what you see and what you notice and what you feel is your body kind of creating that immune response and mounting that immune response. So oftentimes you'll get a low-grade fever, you'll feel really fatigued, and that's your body doing the work of keeping you protected.
All right.
Can I ask another question real quick?
Yeah, but hold on. Well, let's do this. I'm going to strategically get them in. There's going to be a point where we're going to not have questions in the queue. Then you can fill in, and then we'll kind of keep looping back. Right now, we've got about 7 questions in the queue, and we can get through those. Then we'll jump you in, and then we'll keep it flowing.
All right, cool.
All right, cool. All right, so Shardy Wagner said there was a woman from one of the Midwestern states who died from the vaccine a few weeks ago. His follow-up was about the vaccine and allergic reactions. So what should people be doing to explore what things they might be allergic to before taking the vaccine?
This is my plug for primary care. This is your opportunity to have that discussion with your primary care physician, right? So you should be talking with your primary care physician about previous sort of reactions you might have had to a vaccine. Typically, every person that has received the vaccine usually will get a sheet that has the information that's contained in the vaccine. That information is also included on the CDC's website. But primarily, this is an opportunity for you to make sure you're having these conversations with your primary care physician about what you should be considering as a person who's going to get vaccinated.
All right. Thank you. Pastor Daniel Moore says, what do you say to people who are warning against taking the vaccine, saying that they are still in the experimental phases or stages?
I can take that one. There are vaccines in the experimental stages. The Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are not in the experimental phase. There are multiple places along the chain where we have improved efficiency. So I want to be clear. mRNA vaccines, this is the first rollout in America of mRNA vaccines. But the technology has been under development and testing for over 20 years. And we are going to have one of the team members from that, Dr. Kizmika Corbett, is going to be with us. It's far off, but Dr. EJ arranged that. She'll be with us on June 14th at 8:30, Dr. EJ?
8:30.
And you will get to hear it right out of the mouth of one of the scientists who was on the team developing that vaccine. The basics are this. It used to be that when you wanted to make a vaccine, depending on what type it was, you would get the virus, and then you'd try to make a less dangerous form of it, and people would kill off parts of it. Scientists would kill off parts of it with heat or with chemicals, and then you'd have to figure out how to grow it, and you give somebody an attenuated version of the virus, one that would prompt an immune response, but that wouldn't get people sick. That took a long time. And you got to think, viruses need a host. Viruses need a nice host to grow and replicate and all of that. And so they would do things like try to grow the virus in chicken eggs and things like that. So people with egg allergies would have problems. This is a whole different technology. Once you get the genetic code for the virus, once you get the recipe for the whole virus, which people are able to do now in 2 days to 2 weeks, you can isolate any piece of those instructions and literally make a candidate vaccine in 2 weeks. This is transformative. It used to take people years to be able to even grow the virus outside of a human body to develop a candidate vaccine. And I say a candidate vaccine, one that could be tested. So no steps were skipped. It's not an experimental phase. The only thing we don't know is what are the really long-term effects, if there were any. But typically, that's not how vaccines work. If you're going to have a reaction to a vaccine, you're going to see that reaction very soon after you get vaccinated. There's very minor and rare examples where we've seen a reaction to a vaccine show up years later. Mostly what you see is you will see the reaction right away. So the Moderna and Pfizer are far from experimental stages.
So the next question I'm going to might be a cross between the two of you all. It's from Linda Poley. The New York Times reports studies show that those who have been infected need only one shot. Is that your recommendation? She also says that later that with 25,000 infections in Genesee County, that could help with the supply problem. And I think that's true if what is said in the earlier in the paragraph is true. And so could you respond to that?
We're seeing emerging data on the efficacy of either a 1-shot or 2-shot vaccine. And most recent data has been consistent with still delivering the 2-shot therapy because that's what we have the most data about. And we're getting more data around that. It's also true that we're seeing more data around the 2-shot vaccination and ability to prevent transmission or spread. And so at this time, the thing that we have the best data on is the 2-shot vaccine. And where you're able to get it, getting the 2-shot vaccine is the most reasonable option.
All right, thanks so much. So right now I have Helen Rayner is next. We're going to take a little bit of a pause. Helen, don't leave us. 5 questions just after Helen. Don't leave us. Arthur, we got just a minute here. You can jump in and ask a couple questions. It'll be perfect timing.
Yeah, one of the questions that I got was, does the vaccine, when it breaks down, instead of working with or affecting the DNA of your body, does it affect the blood in your body?
You like how I just threw you over there?
I got your alley-oop. So once you get the vaccine, the mRNA particles after they make protein are completely degraded. So at no time are they interacting with the DNA of your cell. They never enter the nucleus, which is something people get really worried about and is actually where DNA lives. They're really not interacting in any way and eventually are degraded. And they don't interact with your blood either.
All right. So this one question. In Genesee County, I have been seeing a lot of disparities for the vaccination shot in Flint in general. How can we fix it for the people that wants to get the shot in Flint, but they're not afforded the opportunity, like in other township cities and other counties? How can we fix that?
So I'll tell you, I sit on the Michigan Governor's Task Force, and I asked a very similar question, Arthur. So that's a great question. You know, we focus a lot on hesitancy, and I think it's the wrong conversation. Hesitancy is something that we'll have to continue to address because people obviously still have a lot of questions and maybe even more questions than answers. But what we have is now a bottleneck because demand far exceeds supply. Just in Genesee County alone, the number I got on Thursday was we have 57,000 people on the wait list, and the list grows by 2,000 people a day. So what we're pushing for is a better process to unclog that bottleneck and figure out who gets to go first. So as people who are hesitant or are a no for now continue to grapple, we've got to do better with unclogging that bottleneck. So I can tell you 2 things that the health commissioner is doing here. And also our top doc, Jonay Caldoon, is actually on Biden-Harris COVID Equity Task Force. So she'll be bringing a lot of this work forward at the federal level. But what we're doing is we're integrating other things like a CDC measure called the Social Vulnerability Index to identify communities specifically that are higher priority because they're high on social vulnerability. Prioritizing people in the line who have pre-existing health conditions or other risk factors. Because what we don't want it to be is that, you know, the people who need it the most are 57,000 people back in line. And unfortunately, that is not going very well right now. We have problems with data. I personally, when I got my first dose of vaccine, they asked me my race. I don't know if it was somehow linked to the first shot. It was in a completely different location. No one asked me on the second shot. When I got my vaccine, there were about 7, 8 people there the first time. I was the only Black person. When I went the second time, there were about 7 or 8 people there. I was the only Black person. We don't have even the public reporting on the data yet, but we already know anecdotally and from the data we have that we've got massive disparities. So I do think we need to continue to address hesitancy, but this issue around equity and who actually gets it in their arms, we got to keep dealing with and keep our foot on the necks of the people who hold the vaccine. Last thing I'll say that's a big problem is the feds paid for what's in those vials. They sent it to states. They had no requirement that those states demonstrate that they could get it to people fairly and equitably. So I believe in the absence of a mandate that it be administered equitably, we're going to continue to see what we see, but for the efforts of people in community pushing for it to be some other way. The other complication is the feds made the mistake of doing direct distribution to pharmacies and big box stores. The state doesn't even have any oversight of what vaccine is going directly from the feds to pharmacies and big box stores. So in Flint, Meyer is a direct distributor of the vaccine. It is going right from the feds to them. The health department and the state has no say over how they do that and who they give it to. But for the vaccine that's coming through hospitals and health departments, I think the push that we need is to be a demand that community be at that table and help prioritize the wait list that we currently have.
So, and I will remind you, Dr. Deborah, that we have a conversation, more conversation, less questions coming up soon, where we're talking about mandating equity, while also lifting up this idea of tying two things together, tying this idea of hesitations and this idea of equitable distribution into the same conversation. All too often, we're having those separately. We're having a conversation about community hesitancy over here and equitable distribution over there. And then we're not targeting it in the spaces or in the places that it needs to be targeted. One thing we've learned is that we need to target this idea of mandating equity at the federal level, because they're controlling the vials that are actually coming into community and then how they're being distributed. And so we've got to be thoughtful about where the source is and how we focus there. But I'm also reminding you that we are having a conversation, you and I and Dr. EJ, soon, really focused on mandating equity, which this could be a whole 45 minutes to an hour just talking about mandating equity and not answering some of the questions that people are having about the vaccines.
Yes, let's get
it. Can I just say this little part right here?
As long as it's a little part.
where we was at the communication meeting that day, and remember when I said I asked the health department, could they get a grant from you to put live people on the phone so that people will be able to call in that don't use the internet? When you all speak, on these equity groups, do you also speak where, like, Genesee County Health Department had it to where 65-year-old people, elders, had to get on the internet and apply to get a shot, and then they had to run 2 duplicate sheets of paper to take to their appointment? 65-year-olds, my uncle doesn't even know how to text yet. And some people have Obama phone. Do you think that plays a serious role in the equity and not being able to get the shots also?
Dr. EJ, I know you got a thought on this one.
No, I just agree. I think we've had conversations with Pamela Hackert at the health department. We've had these conversations with people who are interested in mandating equity. There are aspects of this rollout that kind of prevent it from being easy for people to access, particularly people in minority communities. So when you talk about things like not being able to access the internet to register for the vaccine, that's real. When you recognize that, people need easier access, they need to be able to call a phone number, they need to walk up to a vaccination opportunity, right? Those are the opportunities we're looking to push forward.
Thank you. And so, Helen, I know you've been sitting here for about 15, 16 minutes waiting for us to answer your question. And so we're going to jump right back into these questions. Helen says, what about people that fear safety of the vaccine? It's a very broad question. I'm not sure where to throw it, but you're saying people broadly. So I'm going to say, Dr. Deborah, if you can take a look at this one from a public health perspective.
Well, the thing I would say, and that's my cousin, by the way. Hey, cousin, Jerry. The thing I'll say about that is, and I'm specifically speaking about the 2 vaccines that are out. We're not going to go really at all into the vaccines that are coming out. We're going to leave y'all with that as a cliffhanger. But for the 2 vaccines that we have out, there's really nothing about them. If you are somebody who has had a bad reaction to vaccines in the past, you absolutely need to talk to your primary care physician. If you don't have one, reach out to your local federally qualified health center. There's a health provider there who will, be a partner with you. But the way this vaccine is designed and what it does, it is one of the safest vaccines. And this technology around mRNA vaccines, I just can't say enough how transformative it is and will be for vaccine, both development and vaccine safety. And if people have fear about the safety of the vaccine, the thing I want to let people know is you should have much more fear of the virus itself. The little bit of the instructions on how to make that spike protein, on how to make that key that would unlock your cell and your body being trained to block that key from working is like such an amazing approach to how vaccines are implemented, how they work, the toll that it would take on your body, the risk to people. I mean, it's like transformative. If you got the virus, not only are you getting that little bit of the instructions on how to make the spikes on the crown, You're getting the spikes itself. You're getting the whole viral molecule. You're getting all the instructions. The spike protein is going to come in on the crown, unlock your cell, let the whole molecule in, and wreak havoc. We are finding out now that even people who had low to no symptoms are showing these long-term effects. Didn't have very many symptoms, but when you look below the skin, you're finding out that in fact there was a toll that was taken on their body. So I would not say this if I did not believe it, like down to my bone marrow. The 2 vaccines that are available pose significantly less harm to you than being infected with the virus. And if you were to have a bad immune response to the vaccine, better believe you would have had a way worse immune response to the virus itself.
So, Dr. Deb, we're going to stay in the public health space with our next question with Kimberly, and then we're going to go into the primary care space with Trishelle. And so this next one, before I jump there, I just wanted to say to cousin Jerry that I'm sorry. I know how y'all family roll. I should have said Carolyn. Saying Helen is like saying Carolyn, so I'm sorry.
And she probably don't even know that, you smart aleck.
So is this vaccine going to be forced upon those who don't want it? And Dr. Deborah, if you can not only answer that question, but talk about that from a public health perspective.
Yeah, so listen, this is going to be both public health and it's going to involve a lot of sectors. So I will tell you, what's the organization? I can't believe I'm about to forget the name. It's the organization that protects basically workplace discrimination. They have said, not our domain, not our problem.
Who, OSHA?
Oh, not OSHA. That's occupational safety and hazard. No, this is like they stop discrimination. So if you get fired because of your gender or your race, they're the folks that come in. It'll come to me or somebody will throw it up in the chat. Anyway, that would have been the first line federally to prevent it from being forced on people. I can't say whether or not that's coming. It's possible that there will be a mandate, right? The same way kids are required to be vaccinated before they go to school. So this is not our first time at the mandatory vaccination rodeo, if you will, right? We've seen that kids have to be vaccinated before they go to school. And if they're not, in Baltimore City, if you are not vaccinated and you don't have that documentation, you can't enroll your kids unless you've got an explicit medical reason that you have to provide documentation for, or a religious reason, and you have to provide documentation for that. So I can't say whether or not it's going to be forced upon people. I personally don't think that is the right approach. And I will say we've got about 12% of the U.S. population has already been vaccinated. And because this is likely going to be something like flu, where it's going to have to be a seasonal type or an annual or, periodic vaccination, I think that would actually even be very hard to enforce. If that does happen, what I would be advocating for would be companion supports, things like mandatory paid days off, COVID days off for frontline healthcare workers if they got vaccinated, to be able to take the next day off so that if they had any reaction, they could deal with it and things like that. So nobody can answer that question, but it wouldn't surprise me if it's coming.
All right. And you sound really good right now and clear. Like, I think it's the praise team mic that you got that I saw when you came over to the front. That was beautiful. Trishelle says, if a person takes medication, is there certain medication that may cause serious side effects when taking the vaccine? Dr. EJ.
We are seeing with some of the immunomodulators that are used to treat people who have active COVID that those patients would wait about 90 days before getting the COVID vaccine. But that's a really important space for you to have that conversation with your primary care doctor. Generally, we haven't seen, there's not a list, there are not specific medications that we're calling out other than kind of what I mentioned with immune system modulators and treatment of COVID. But generally for those who have kind of regular chronic medical conditions that we hear about often, we've generally seen those to be safe. But this is a space where you talking to your primary care physician, thinking about your risk is really important.
All right. Becky Brown says this PBS documentary is about 11 minutes on how the vaccine was created. Check it out. And then I want to thank Dondre Young, who's been throwing some things in the chat from MDHHS focused on like showing or sharing information with the community. Lisa Rawlings said this is very, very extremely helpful. Shar said he's going to check some stuff out. I'm trying to get to my next question there. There we go. Florinda Lee Hall. Are there statistics of which vaccines have the most side effects? Because my elderly relatives didn't have any side effects, but my 50-year-old sister had side effects.
So the short version is there's data available. I don't think that because people ask all the time, if I had a choice, which one should I pick? And I always tell people most of the time you won't have a choice. And if you're offered the opportunity, take the one that's available to you. So I'll just tell you from my experience, the data are not suggesting that one has more side effects than the other. And it's not really entirely clear why some people are having a little bit more effects than others. The same way it's not entirely clear why some people respond differently to actually being exposed to the virus than other people. Again, it's about your immune response. And so there are statistics available. The most frequent effects that people have from the vaccine, the biggest one is a sore arm. Some people might spike a fever. Some people might get a headache. You hear a lot about fatigue. Arthur shared that he had fatigue, you know, and some of those things. But, you know, honestly, these are just signs that the vaccine is working. And I think this example that Florinda put in is important because she says her elderly relatives didn't have any side effects, but her 50-year-old sister did. So, you know, we're still learning. And some of these questions we might not ever have a concrete answer to, but the side effects are mild and mostly manageable, and a little bit of self-care makes it worth it. A little bit of self-care. You spike a fever,
The only thing I'll add is that I haven't seen any data that suggests that the side effects are any different than what we see with any other vaccine. So the side effect profile of fever, fatigue, you know, a little bit of arm pain, those are the same kind of side effects that we would expect to see with the flu shot, with some of the other vaccines that we give regularly.
So Tanya Burns asks, is there a proposed waiting period for people to take the vaccine if they've had COVID-19 already?
So generally, the proposed waiting period includes you being kind of recovered from your COVID illness. And so once you've fully recovered and you've exited quarantine, if you have not received immune therapy or significant treatment for COVID, we're generally advising that you can be vaccinated. But this is another space where making sure you're having that really robust conversation with your primary care physician to make sure that you didn't receive anything that might be sort of contraindicated or not in line with getting the vaccine is the case for you.
Yeah, and then this is a more local question, Dr. Deborah. How was the GISD able to vaccinate their staff, but not Flint Community School District? And I think Flint Community Schools had a round of their final round of vaccinations for teachers on this last Saturday, but I'm not 100% certain on that. But you may know the process by which these school districts have gotten access to the vaccine.
So I'll just be real clear. When we decided that schools would be reopening, and that was the governor's declaration. I believe she made the recommendation that all schools be reopened by March 1. I believe that has now been changed, and that date has been pushed back to a date in May. You know, we're just seeing, unfortunately, things like privilege play out. So it would make sense that GISD, which includes, you know, Flint Community Schools are a part of the Genesee Intermediate School District. So I do believe that Flint Community Schools have had the option. Our original opening date of February 22nd now has been pushed back because of the governor's recommendation. And the teachers have pushed back saying, hey, even though the kids aren't going back, the teachers are being called back. So that question is sort of like a hard one to answer. But I do believe that the opportunity has now been availed to Flint Community Schools. And I am 100% sure that the governor has included school teachers now in that essential workers category, and school teachers are eligible. Again, it's about how we prioritize that wait list and that line now.
So Demeeker says, what about those who have been reported by media outlets as dying within days after taking the vaccine due to underlying health conditions? Do you have anything that you can share on that?
I would not rely on the media as a trusted and credible source of information. You know, I just wouldn't. I mean, you know, people get a little slither of a story and they run with it. I think it's creating more fear and hysteria and misinformation than it is good. What I can tell you is if somebody is vaccinated and they die, there will be an investigation. Every vaccine, when it goes to market, has what's called a Data Safety and Monitoring Board, DSMB. That Data Safety and Monitoring Board has to monitor every adverse event, and severe illness or death are an adverse event. I would rely on what the FDA says and their Data Safety Monitoring Board. They have no dog in the fight to suppress data and information. So if somebody dies and they were recently vaccinated, believe that that death will be investigated. The media will take something and run with it before there's any verification. So do not count on the national media as a source of information. I am looking at that stuff, and the FDA will be reporting out on that.
So Dr. Deborah, and you're awesome, so you might even know these numbers. But I mean, I know some of the numbers that we do know is the number of COVID deaths that has happened across the country, like over 500,000 of those. And then we know the number of vaccines that are going in people's arms. So if you just play the numbers, even if you were counting every single one of those media deaths, those media reported deaths, if you're playing the numbers, which number would you play on? And I think that's a question that we all have to ask ourselves. We have to take that question home to our dinner tables and ask our friends and our family. For me, 500,000 people have died of COVID. And I've seen a handful of deaths that have been reported on the national news. And if I had to play the numbers, it's an easy decision for me and my family. And I'm not forcing that decision on anyone else, but I'm being realistic about what the numbers suggest. I have another, there's a separate question here. So one, Dondre is going to get pulled into the group if he answers one more question for us. U.S. EEOC.
Nah, he's dope. He's helping.
Employment opportunity. Yeah, he's going to get just pulled in if he answers
one
more
was. Yep. That's who it was.
So are you protected to a certain extent after the shot? This is, again, our brother, Dr. Moore, Dr. Daniel Moore. Are you protected to a certain extent after the first shot?
You are. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you got it.
So we're seeing that there is some protection that's conferred after the first shot, but it's not the complete protection that you would receive with the 2-shot dose. So it's still important to make sure you're getting that second shot. But we should feel good that we have some protection. That still means we have to, be careful and wear our masks and distance and wash our hands and everything else. But both Moderna and Pfizer are showing upwards of 50% level of efficacy after the first shot.
All right. And then I think the follow-up to that question is really just to talk a little bit about waning immunity, because people are talking about first shot and second shot. I think it's just appropriate to talk about waning immunity.
Yeah. So that's part of the purpose of getting 2 shots, right? So the first shot gives you that first little bit of an immune response. It kind of cues up your immune response and says there's something going on here. And that second shot is kind of the purpose of giving your immune system the time to build the longer term immunity. So in the case of Pfizer, it's about 3 weeks or 21 days. In the case of Moderna, it's about 28 days or 4 weeks. And that gives your body time to produce the longer term response, because over time, that first initial response wanes. And in those 3 to 4 weeks, you spend time building a robust long-term immune response that can respond to a potential COVID infection.
All right.
Isaiah.
Yes.
Do I have time for one more question?
We are at an hour, so you do, and I've got about 4 questions in the queue. So
all right, just real quick. I'm playing the numbers too, right? And I hope don't nobody get offended by me saying this. Here in Flint, the crime rate is real high. And I think the possibility of getting shot in Flint is more likely than dying from a shot in Flint than a shot in the arm for a vaccination. And I mean, we looking at the numbers that way, if you're going to put it that way. Dr. Furr-Holden, my question is, during the COVID, right, back when it first started, a lot of people were dying from where their immune system was crashing, especially the healthy people. Does this vaccination, will it do the same thing as far as building up too much immune system or too many T cells or B cells and making your system crash?
I think the likelihood of that is much less. Again, remember, The way the vaccine works, it took a little bit of the instructions, okay? And I love talking about it. Like, imagine if some dude, some bad guys were trying to break into your house, okay? They've got a key to break into your house. They done rigged up some master key. That's what the spike protein is. It's the key to break into your cell, to break into your house, okay? Once you know that what that key looks like, you can then build a block to stop that key from working in your lock. If that key does work, not only you don't have a problem. If some thugs got a key to your house, but they can't get in, they're no threat to you. But if they breach the perimeter, it's not the key that's really the problem. It's the thugs. And the thugs are on the inside of that viral molecule because they inside got the instructions for everything. They got the master key. They got the instructions on how to break into your safe, the floor plans for your house, the everything. Plus the thugs. That's the virus itself, right? And so what this is working on is just, it's only working on one piece. It's working on one piece. So the vaccine is going to cause much less of an immune response than you will get from the entire molecule, viral molecule itself. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you were going to have some adverse or over immune response from the vaccine, you're going to have a cataclysmic immune response from the virus itself, right?
Right.
Somebody,
Susan Borton says, if you don't have a side effect, does that mean the vaccine didn't work? And so Dr. EJ, could you take that one for us?
We joke a little bit about this because I didn't have an immune response. And largely about half of the people in some of the studies didn't have an immune response either. And I was comforted by that data because I was feeling a little like upset that I didn't get, some fatigue or anything. But no, you should not feel like the vaccine didn't work if you didn't get a big response. You should be thankful and be confident that you're protected to the level of the efficacy of the vaccine.
All right.
Well, and the question is, it's not that people didn't have an immune response. They didn't have side effects.
Side effects. Yeah.
You didn't have side effects. You had an immune response. Your body was doing the work.
Exactly.
For some people, when their body is doing the work, they get tired. They might get a little bit of a fever, but believe what's supposed to be happening under the skin is happening.
All right. Darnell Ishmael. Hi, brother. What is the efficacy of this vaccine versus these new strains of the virus? Dr. Deborah, you want to take that one?
So there's two different strains that are out. There's more than two strains. I shouldn't say strains, variants. There's multiple variants that are out, again, because viruses mutate. And when those viruses mutate and then that new mutation sort of takes hold, we call it the variant. So the one that's here in the US is the B117 variant, the UK variant. Again, because the way the vaccine is working is it now recognizes that key. It got the instructions on how to make the key, the spike protein, and it now knows how to block it. What it looks like is the B117 variant, that spike protein, that key that the vaccine trains your body how to fight, it looks like it's still pretty effective at fighting that one. It does. The data are pointing to is pretty effective, but we have to keep monitoring. So we're going to keep monitoring and understand there will be more variants that will be coming. That's why likely this will be something like a seasonal or an annual or something like that type of vaccination. For the South Africa strain, it looks like it's less effective, the vaccines that are available now, at fighting against those. But again, like I tell everybody, y'all, people gonna have to stay on their toes. Science is on their toes. Like, we're gonna have to keep the surveillance going to really understand this over time. But for the B117 that's here, it looks like the vaccine still has pretty high effectiveness. Dr. EJ, you want to add anything to that?
I was just going to say why. So you've described this spike protein and this key, and I think those are really helpful analogies, because when we have a variant, really what that means is a tiny piece of that spike protein changes, right? But not enough so that the instructions and the key stop working yet. And in this case, the vaccines that we have are still working because the variants haven't changed that spike enough for the key to not work, right? So we need, in order for the variants to change that spike enough, there would have to be multiple different changes. And we're lucky because our immune response adapts and changes to the spike protein. So for the most part, this vaccine that we have, it's created against this entire spike. And we would need really big pieces of that spike to change for the key and the instructions that Dr. Furr-Holden has alluded to, for those to not work. And right now, they're still working. It's possible that with future variants, we could get enough change in that spike protein that our instructions don't work anymore.
All right. So we got 2 questions left. One I'm going to throw out really quickly. Can you still get COVID if you have the vaccine? And I'm not sure if Dr. Deborah or Dr. EJ want to take that one.
Yes. Unlikely. But yes.
This is why it will be a much milder case.
And it's a much more mild case, yes. Right. But it is possible.
And so this last question, I want to rotate it through everyone, and I want to say answer this question from your perspective. I know 2 of you, one will be answering from a public health perspective, one will be answering from I would say, more direct service, family physician kind of perspective. And then Arthur, because of the opening that you gave us, I want you to offer from your own personal perspective. The question says, I don't trust nothing these corporate thugs do and nobody can promote them. Hold on, that wasn't the question. I'm sorry, but that was a follow-up to the question. Why should we Black people trust Pfizer, Moderna, or any other corporate pharmaceutical? And then there's several comments that kind of follow that up. But just answer that question for us. And I'm going to start with you, Arthur. Then we go to Dr. EJ, and then we'll end with Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden.
Like I said earlier, I saw people getting in the line, and I heard a lot of people saying, "Hey, the Tuskegee experiment." Well, Tuskegee experiment was all Blacks. Who I'm seeing in the line now is all white. So if they're trying to kill me off as far as from, regarding my skin color, and the majority of the people that are afraid to take this shot are African Americans. And if, they're trying to kill me off because of my color, well, it's showing up a lot of white people in the line trying to go first to get this shot. And that was one of the things that I looked at. And then, like I said before, being in the military, we went down a long line with vaccinations, taking shots. We didn't took the measles shot. We didn't took the mump shot, chicken pox. I mean, a whole lot of different things, and we're still here. So I just thought about that, and I said, hey, you know what? I'd rather take the shot than get the virus.
Thank you, Arthur. Dr. EJ. Dr. EJ, could you do me a favor? There's another question that just popped in here, and I know you have the answer to it because you've answered it before. So if you can kind of do 2, answer the question that I gave, but also answer this question of, and you knew exactly where I was going, D'Amica. What if you've already been infected with COVID-19? If it's successfully overcome the disease, do you have natural or that herd immunity against the disease? Would you still need to be vaccinated?
I think this is a great question. And I think the best kind of example is the fact that we have 2 shots for most of our vaccines, right? So that initial infection sort of primes your immune response. And we're seeing some data that suggests with some of the vaccines that people who've had COVID before might need 1 shot down the line, et cetera. But the most important piece is this: the initial shot or the initial COVID infection primes your immune response. But remember, we talked about the fact that just brings up your acute immune response, and your body needs time to produce a more robust immune response, and it needs more of that data to produce a more robust immune response, so that when you really do encounter COVID-19, should you encounter it again, you can successfully evade it, stay away from it, fight it, etc. And you're less likely to have severe disease. So it is really important to get that second shot. You might have some partial immunity, but you won't have full protection. To get to the second question, I'll first start by acknowledging that we have all the reason in the world to have distrust in some of our communities and our corporations, and that makes sense to me. As someone who tries to be data driven, I was able to see the data, and I think the data has been pretty transparent. I've been able to go to my spaces and places and talk to colleagues and find the data that these vaccines are efficacious, that they work, that they have low side effects, and that there's not anything that I'm concerned about. I've seen people that look like me get the vaccine. I've seen people that look like me as a part of the development of the vaccine. And so in part that's instilled more trust in me. But I think it would be disingenuous for us to pretend like we don't have a reason to have some distrust. And I think what we can do is to find our sources that we trust and look to them to guide us. And that's what I've done. I've gone to sources like the CDC. I've gone to sources of information that have previously been trustworthy. And I've let that guide my decision making. The other piece that I think has been alluded to a lot during this webinar has been, I worry a lot more about COVID, and as a family physician have seen a lot more severe side effects from COVID and severe and bad outcomes from COVID than I have seen with the vaccine, or even before the vaccine was available, then I was really worried about the vaccine. And so those are the things that kind of helped drive my decision making.
All right, thank you. And so, Dr. Deborah, I need you to do two for me as well. I need you to answer the question that's on. I also need you to answer the question about vaccine protections, because there were several questions about whether or not you would still get COVID if you got the vaccine. And I know we talk about vaccine protections being 80 to 99%, but we're talking about like 205 million vaccines that have been given out. So that leaves a whole lot of folks that might not be protected, even if 99% of folks are protected. And so just playing the numbers again, there are a number of people that will take the vaccine and still maybe get COVID because it's only 80% to 99% effective, at least based off of data that I've seen. So if you can answer the question about protections and answer the question about pharmaceuticals.
We can't hear you.
We cannot hear you.
Thank you. I threw this one up on the screen too, because I think it points to what you're saying. And I want to make sure we clarify something for people. So one, I don't trust Pfizer. I don't trust Moderna. I don't trust pharmaceutical companies. I believe that they are here for profits. And maybe some of them are well-meaning and, started off to do something that helps people and humanity. But let's make no mistake about it. These places are businesses. So I don't have any inherent trust of the pharmaceutical industry. What I will say is they make a lot more money off of hypertension medication, something that you got to take every day that they can create a regular pipeline for, than they do off of vaccines. I can't get into that now, but the pipeline for medications and profits from literally like making diuretics and hypertension medicines and medicines for neuropathy and medicines for cholesterol are much more profit producing than vaccines. So I want to just say that. And I don't trust them because I don't trust their intentions. What I do trust is the process that we have in place. And because this is literally something that has no discrimination, COVID does not care the color of the host, the economic status of the host, doesn't care whether or not you've got a pre-existing health condition. It's a virus. Its only goal is to survive and thrive. Because of that, and this is something that's affecting all of us and everybody's in line, that does provide something for me. But as a public health professional, what matters the most is that I can actually see the data. I trust the process of the FDA and the Data Safety and Monitoring Board and all of that. So I will say that does make sense to me. And not that there hasn't been medical wrongdoing, but this isn't something, if we were talking about a treatment for sickle cell, I'd be having a completely different conversation. We're talking about something that affects everybody. This comment that Tanisha made, I want to make it really, really clear. If you get COVID, Dr. EJ alluded to it, you have it looks like about 90 days. The antibodies that you develop on your own last about 90 days. So we've now got people who have been reinfected, have gotten COVID once, and they've been reinfected, right? We saw that about 7-8 months into the pandemic. The antibodies that you build yourself are about 90 days good. So if you've been a COVID case and recovered, about 90 days after that, if you are eligible and have an opportunity, you should get the vaccine. And as Dr. EJ said, that second dose of the vaccine, the first one kind of primes your immune system. Same thing with COVID. But notice you got the whole virus, like the whole ass virus. So it didn't just prime your immune system. For some people, it took you out. It kills people, right? So maybe you had the benefit of being primed, or you were one of those unlucky people who it killed, or one of those unlucky people who it didn't kill you, but it wreaked havoc on you and it took you down. And I know people that got COVID, and I'll share something very personal. My daughter has COVID. I am literally in the house now, and my daughter, my 19-year-old daughter, has COVID. She's been in isolation in her room since last Monday, which is when she tested positive. She started having symptoms on Friday. I was so grateful that I was vaccinated. I'm 46. I'm a former tobacco smoker. I'm a little, overweight. I don't have any like major health conditions, but me and my family got together, and I'm like, if I look in our family, I would be the one who would have a real problem potentially with this virus, not the other kids. I felt very good about my decision to get vaccinated. And I will tell you, she's been COVID positive for probably about 10 or 12 days now, based on when she tested positive and when her symptoms started. I literally went and got a COVID test. I did a drive-up test at Walgreens because I wanted to know if I was actually COVID positive. Did the vaccine sort of do what it was supposed to do and prevent me from either actually contracting the disease, right? I could have been exposed to the virus, but not contracted the disease. Or am I positive and it's working the way it should and it stopped me from getting severe symptoms? All I can tell you is my very healthy, very vibrant 19-year-old has been down for the count, completely exhausted. The 4 or 5 days when it was bad, she lost smell. She had terrible headaches, spiked the fever, and all of that. And she's otherwise healthy. And it's impossible. We honor protocols out in the house, but we're all lonely. So we hug every day. She has a real bad habit of motorboating drinks out of the refrigerator. I find it hard to believe that I did not get exposed to COVID living in the house with her. And I'm here and I'm well and I'm able to take care of her. So even if I got COVID, the how it has affected me has been so minor because I'm vaccinated. And I can tell you, if something happened to me, the impact that would have on my family and the community I serve, I did it for myself, but I also did it because it just mattered to me. So if you can still get COVID, even though you've gotten a shot, yeah.
I was going to say,
I just want to tell people, you'd rather get COVID vaccinated than unvaccinated. If you were going to get COVID, you'd rather be vaccinated than not. That's my bottom line.
Now, thank you, one, for sharing your daughter's story. I want you to take one other question when we talk. As long as we do, good questions pop up and we can't avoid but answer them. And so there is one question that asks about the speed at which this vaccine was created. It talks about it being developed really quickly, 9 months. And I know some of the research that I've read said that it was developed in 1 year. And then I've seen some other things that says that they've been studying, didn't start from scratch. They've been studying it for 50 years. And so could you share from your perspective, I'm not sure which of you would like to take that one first, how fast it was developed, why it was developed so fast? I mean, I think they said before this one, the fastest one was like the mumps in 4 years. This one was a year. But what does that mean when it's developed so fast for testing and all of that?
Well, the thing I'll say, and then I'll throw it over to Dr. EJ. Remember, this is a different type of technology. The older vaccines, they had to literally figure out how to grow the virus outside of a host because you wouldn't grow, so they would grow it in animals or chicken eggs or things like that. That was a process. We don't have to do that anymore. So the vaccine technology, mRNA technology, vaccines that take a piece of the recipe on how the virus reproduces, you can develop what we call candidate vaccines in a matter of days. All you need is the genetic sequence of the virus, and then you can start to make a candidate vaccine that you can then move into clinical trials. So I understand people are like, but how is it that those old ones took so long? We no longer have to figure out how to grow vaccines outside of the human. We no longer have to figure out how to, culture them and make them safe to inject a little piece of the actual virus. Most of the vaccines that I'm literally imagining that a lot of the vaccines that are out because of mRNA technology, they're going to start to re-engineer them.
Probably.
So all of the things that we used to have to do, we don't have to do anymore. Once you get the genetic code, it's literally like you could throw it on the photocopier, like the biological photocopier, and you can say, you ever did this, like try to juke a document and you didn't have a lot of time, so you just took some white out and whited out certain pieces that you didn't want to show up in your copy? That's what we can do now. We can literally say, we only want this piece of the instructions, and we can white it out and put it on a biological photocopier and do whatever we want. That technology is going to be transformative, and it allows things to go a lot faster.
So I'll speak a little bit to why we were able to get there so quickly. So we had some data from SARS, right? We had a lot of good data from the previous coronavirus vaccines that led us to identify which part of the protein we might use for mRNA production, right? So we had some previous data that helped us a little bit. mRNA technology for vaccines is completely new. mRNA technology in medicine is not entirely new. We've used mRNA technology for cancer therapeutics. It's been used before, just never for vaccines. So we had some idea that, one, we had a good target for the COVID vaccine, and two, we had a good potential distributor in the mRNA technology. The other piece is that the majority of drug therapeutics requires a lot of money and investment, right? And anyone who's a bench scientist, anyone who works in pharmaceutics will tell you that they have to oftentimes work really hard to get funding for new drugs or therapies to come to market. This was not the case for the COVID vaccine. We had a really significant need because, as Dr. Furr-Holden alluded to, COVID does not discriminate. There were lots of people of all ages, races, genders dying, and we needed something quickly, and there was a fast and quick investment in that technology. And those three things, I think, are what led to such a quick turnaround in our vaccine production.
So I want to just thank everyone for joining. Dr. Jennifer Edwards-Johnson, Dr. Deborah Furr-Holden, Mr. Arthur Woodson. Jaleel X. Carter says it best. At the end of the day, it's everyone's personal choice to take the vaccine. What we want to do is we want to make sure that everyone has what they need, the information they need to make the best decision for them and for their family. And so we're going to continue to do these lives. We're going to jump up and we're going to talk about the vaccine. We're going to talk about the information available, the way it's changing and how it might impact lives. Because again, we want everyone to have the information they need to make the decision, the best decision that they can make for them and their family, as this is changing and evolving every day. So thank you all for jumping on. Thank you again, Art, Dr. EJ, Dr. Furr-Holden, for doing this, and we'll see you all next time.
All right. Thank you.